Hello and welcome to the Hibs Observer post-match debrief here with myself, Liam Bryce, as always with Patrick McPartlin, on what turned out to be a pretty good day for Hibs all round. 2-0 victory here at Easter Road over Ross County, and results elsewhere meant that 3 points was enough to take Hibs back into the top six, which is obviously where they want to be as we head towards the Premiership split. What a classic, Patrick, was it? But I mean, I think at the end of a kind of long week, 3 games in a week, the same starting 11 for all 3 games, it was probably about just getting the job done by any means necessary for Hibs to do, wasn't it?
Yeah, exactly. If there's one thing this Hibs team hasn't been particularly good at this season, it's been grinding out results when they need to. And certainly think today was a perfect example of that. First half, really not a lot to write home about. Just I think chances at a premium for both teams, and then I suppose something out of nothing really. On the hour mark when Mizian Maolida was intuitive enough to try that again. It was Jesus, I just try that
You're
again.
listening to me too much.
I know. Just basically showed great sort of instinct to pounce on a loose ball in the box after George Rickinson sort of fumbled the cross from Dylan Vente, and I think that just sort of gave Hibs a really kind of calmed them down a little bit. I think gave them that goal that they needed, and then they were pretty much in the driving seat from then on. David Marshall with a really good save from Eamon Brophy at 1-0, and Dylan Levitt on at half-time for Nathan Mariah Welsh making the point safely on. But as you say, not a classic. It really, it looked like a team at the end of a 3-game week. A lot of tired legs, a lot of heavy legs, misplaced passes. But I think ultimately the main thing is the 3 points. Never mind the performance, and that's what they got.
Yeah, it was just about getting that 3 points on the board today. It could end up being kind of pretty important afternoon, I think, when it's all said and done, or at least as it comes to the split. Obviously, the ambition will be to just chase European football for as long as possible. But just in terms of the game itself, I can't disagree at all. The first half was a bit of a non-event mostly. Hibs, they did look a wee bit like a side who, I think coming off the back of the derby, which is always physically and mentally a bit draining. It was lacking a bit of intensity. It was a wee bit ponderous in possession, and I think Ross County, they set their stall out straight away. It was kind of 10 men behind the ball. They were kind of quite visibly slowing the game down at every opportunity, even early in the first half, just trying to frustrate. And I think the manager, Don Cowie, sort of he made a point in his post-match press conference that they were maybe trying to make a point of trying to get the crowd to turn a wee bit, or wanting it to be a bit flat in the stands as well, and they probably did succeed in doing that. But it's just it's a natural reaction to what was a pretty underwhelming first half. I think Hibs were, without being troubled at all by Ross County, I think they were just a wee bit risk averse in possession. I think a couple of times, guys were trying to take responsibility and stuff. Things weren't coming off. There were maybe moments to play quicker where they didn't, and then moments where guys maybe had to relax on the ball and didn't. So it was kind of speeding it up and slowing it down at the wrong times, I felt. And there was a couple of guys, I think, who were a wee bit off it. I think Nathan Mariah Welsh being one of them, but Nick Montgomery did explain afterwards that he is maybe still carrying a bit of a knock from midweek, and maybe just didn't want to let on, which kind of it's maybe, I think managers to an extent that as long as he's not done himself any real damage, they won't mind that. Guys who are just determined to soldier on and play through wee knocks here and there. But as it turned out, bringing Dylan Levitt on at half time actually, it had a real impact on the game. He brought a bit more kind of forward thinkingness to the midfield. He's a kind of player who he sees those forward passes before other people do, and he can make them in a way, and that's a quick way. He can release the ball quickly, get players on the half turn like Marcondes, feeding Martin Boyle. He played one brilliant pass, Levitt, just first time diagonal across the park for Abita. And it was kind of around about that time you felt Hibs were maybe making kind of inroads. But I feel like Levitt did have a fair amount to do with that. He did impress me when he came on. I think I said in the report, he's like he's a fascinating player at times, because he's so clearly capable of brilliance in terms of his passing. We know he can finish. He had a lovely turn in the moments before the goal. It's the ball came to him, he spun away in midfield, and then that's got Hibs moving up the park, which is where the first goal comes from. I think if he could just add, just sort of real consistency to his game, he would be a real asset for Hibs, because he still does have the kind of odd moment where he just seems to have a momentary short circuit, and there was the one where he gave the ball away twice, kind of near Hibs' defensive third, under no real pressure, and then he follows that up with kind of raking passes the length of the pitch. He's picking guys out from miles away, playing really nice passes round the corner. So I mean, I think it was a really good performance. Mostly from Levitt. I was really impressed with him, and he obviously gets his goal at the end, which I think he deserved. And yeah, it's just, it's obviously good to see guys coming off the bench and making an impact, which kind of maybe was a wee bit surprised that Nick Montgomery didn't switch it up a wee bit, considering it was 3. But I can also understand the decision just to keep that consistency in the team. And yeah, I mean, I don't think not much to get down about from a Hibs perspective. It's a good result into the top 6, decent performances from some players, and it's Maolida again, isn't it? He's becoming such a difference maker at the moment. It's he's scoring different types of goals as well, isn't he? That was more of a poacher's finish today. He was in the right place at the right time, kind of anticipating the ball was going to drop.
Yeah, and I think if you look back to his first performance for Hibs, that sort of 3-0 defeat at home to Rangers, I think there was a lot of fans who felt a little bit aggrieved that Hibs had brought somebody like this in and talked him up to the extent they had. Obviously they hadn't. I don't think they'd kind of promised the world, but here's a player who's commanded sort of large transfer fees earlier in his career, signed by Hertha Berlin, and obviously there's a little bit of questions over his attitude because of what's happened there, and publicly castigated by his manager, has been cast to the side's B team. He's playing down in the sort of 4th, 5th tier of German football, but his debut performance was exactly what you'd expect from somebody who's not been playing at a high level for quite some time. It was nothing really to write home about. I think it might well have been that game where I suggested he looked a bit like a spider on roller skates. Just couldn't get the ball under control. Passes were being mishit, overhit. Just one of those performances where you just think, have Hibs actually signed the wrong player in this window? But since then, I think he's obviously got the equaliser at Kilmarnock in his game, the second game after that. And since then, I think you've just seen him really kind of go from strength to strength. He's must be a nightmare to play against. Jordan Abita said in midweek that he's not up against him too much in training, because obviously I think they play on the same side. But when he sees what he does to the other fullbacks, he's kind of quite glad that he's on the same side. But yeah, you can see that I think he is improving. He's enjoying just the sort of probably this trust from the coaching staff that he can start games, he can start out wide, he can play centrally, he can score goals like he scored against Dundee, score goals like he scored against Kilmarnock, against Inverness, and then today, as you say, poacher's finish. But I mean, he's just becoming a player that the side can really rely on, the coaching staff as well. And I think when for so long Hibs have relied on somebody like Martin Boyle to kind of get those goals and get assists, and Boyle, like quite a few players today, I thought he had quite a quiet game. A couple of times where he was getting good crosses over, but what you need from your front four, and we've talked about this, that since the January window's closed, since players have come back from injury and international duty, that the Hibs do look a lot more potent in the final third. And a big part of that is Myziane's sort of continued rise to kind of full fitness. And Nick Montgomery saying afterwards that still thinks he's got a lot more to give, which is an exciting prospect for Hibs fans, and a potentially terrifying one for opposition defences. And I think you can just see that he looks a lot more comfortable. He looks like he's enjoying his football. And I think when he plays well, and you've got Emi Marcondes, I didn't think he was brilliant today, but again, he's not played a lot of football either. When you're getting these sorts of performances from these players who maybe still aren't 100%, then I think that's quite exciting. And I think Hibs obviously on a better run of form than they were on previously. Well documented that they went for so long without a league win, And now things, the team's looking settled. Everyone knows, like, the responsibilities, the duties, what they're expected to do, and you've got players who can come off the bench and make a difference as well. So if somebody's not really doing it from the start, as today we saw with Nathan Mariah-Welsh, they can bring on, someone like Dylan Levitt. But at the same time, Ellie Yuan came on today, he makes the second goal, and I think that now this sort of squad depth has just proven to be really, really important for Hibs. And I just think, you look at Emi Marcondes on Wednesday night, look at Myziane today, you look at other players in previous games, and it's spreading around the responsibility when it comes to goals, when it comes to assists. And I mean, Dylan Venti's cross for the opener today, okay, Wickens got to it first, fumbled it, but it's just that mixing it up so that it's not always Martin Boyle going down the right, it's not always Myziane going down the left. They're coming inside, they're mixing it up, and I think teams are finding that really difficult to deal with, when not so long ago you knew what you were getting with Hibs. It was going to be this kind of 4-4-2, and you knew that the fullbacks were going to be pushing high, you knew that one of the midfielders was going to be dropping into to create a back three, and the front four was going to be kind of interchanging throughout the game. But I feel now it's more a case of the personnel they have, and the formation is just Hibs look a lot more solid, look a lot more dangerous going forward. Looked at midweek that the expected goals is sort of rising game on game. Maybe that might have changed today, granted. But I think the other thing as well from today is the fact that it's a clean sheet, and there haven't been too many of those for Hibs. So I think credit to the defence, and also to David Marshall, who did have, I think, one particularly important save, that one from Brophy at 1-0. But I just think important that not only has the team got 3 points on a day when they haven't been at their best, when people haven't been firing on all cylinders, but they've also got a clean sheet.
Yeah.
And you think, if that's coming from, a sort of 60-65% performance, then, you think that bodes well for the rest of the season. And without getting ahead of ourselves, going into next Sunday's quarter-final.
Yeah, I think the clean sheet is a big thing, because have been few and far between, certainly in games of late. And I felt that, I mean, Hibs were solid mostly, I think, at the back today. By the same token, I don't think Ross County showed really any ambition at all. It was a kind of really conservative performance, but they do have two guys up top who scored goals against most, if not all, teams in the league, and they limited them to very, very little. I think Rocky Bashiri coming back in has added a bit of solidity. He's been very good defensively, I think, since he's come back. Kind of looked like he'd never been away in that sense, because obviously he was we went to the Africa Cup of Nations and didn't kick a ball, and you were kind of expecting an element of, when he comes back in, might be a wee bit rusty, might take a few games to get up to speed. Would he be used maybe a wee bit sparingly, just to kind of not tempt fate in terms of breaking down with an injury if he's not really played? But he's really slotted in well. He's got a robustness about him in terms of how he's coping with the heavy fixture load this week, and you'd expect him to stay in the team heading into the Scottish Cup next week. But just to touch on, obviously, should touch on the fact that Hibs are now into the top six, having it wasn't so long ago that we were actually starting to contemplate the prospect as is this going to end up being have they left themselves too little margin for error going into these last games, with other teams a good few points ahead of them, nobody above them as such, certainly in terms of Dundee like flying, but it did feel like Hibs' margin for error in terms of getting back into the top six was really, really small. And the fact you're coupling it with, it's a team that has struggled for consistency over the course of the season, you did sort of feel, well, maybe is it going to be too much an ask? But I think you need to give real credit to the players and the coaching staff for engineering a pretty good turnaround this week. 7 points from a possible 9. They will almost certainly feel it should have been 9 out of 9. But considering there was a derby in there to come out with that return when things are really the kind of pressure's on now, isn't it? The pressure really is on, because it's kind of unthinkable for for Hibs to finish outside of the top six, especially in a league where it's not been a great standard of division this season, in my opinion. It should really be the minimum that Hibs looking for. So I mean, compared to where things were even just last Saturday, it's been positive in that sense, and now it is very much in Hibs' own hands.
It is, yeah, and I think you make a good point about consistency. But I also think, you know, if Hibs had started off the season with the players they've had since January, or since the January window closed, you know, and if they hadn't had players out with injury, then you do wonder what they might have been capable of. And probably the same with the manager, who just seems to have really, you know, struck up this, you know, really good working relationship with, you know, the whole squad. You know, even guys who aren't playing regularly, who are maybe only getting a few minutes off the bench here and there. But I think, you know, there's a couple of things about this division, this league, is that, you know, mad things can happen. Like today, you know, I think, you know, people, you look at sort of Rangers and Motherwell and you think, well, you know, surely that's, given how well Rangers have been playing, you think that's only going to go one way. And then, you know, full credit to Motherwell, who, you know, get what is, you know, what I think could be termed a shock result without, you know, doing them a disservice. But then you also look in Paisley, Aberdeen 1-0 up going into injury time, and, you know, somehow they lose 2-1, and it's just, you know, it does sort of seem a little bit like the kind of league where, you know, anything can happen.
Yep.
And, you know, I think previous sort of iterations of this Hibs team might have, you know, got the result last weekend, performed well in midweek, and then just completely crumbled today, and either drawn or maybe even lost. Just, you know, the psychological aspect possibly being, you know, a bit too much to cope with, or, you know, even the physical aspect. But, you know, I think there's like a real belief in this Hibs team. We said this on Wednesday night, that, you know, they look like they believe in each other. They look like they trust each other. They look like they've been playing together for a heck of a lot longer than they have. And I think that's just so important. And I think that, you know, Nick Montgomery would be the first person to say this, that, you know, Hibs can't rely on other results to go their way. They have to look after themselves first. And, you know, that's probably the best position to be in. If they're saying all we can do is, you know, try and pick up 3 points every time we play, and whatever happens elsewhere happens. Because ultimately, you know, you kind of have to look after yourselves first. If other things go your way, then, you know, that's an added bonus. But, you know, I just think even today, I mean, you know, we go back to what we were saying earlier. Even today, when it's not a top performance, there are mistakes, there are errors. You could hear the crowd getting a little bit jittery at times, but they still managed to grind out, a victory with, you know, goals from somebody who's turning into a bit of a talisman, and someone who's not had the most auspicious of seasons. I think he has his issues. We sort of spoke about him not being particularly effective, certainly when played in a 2, but, you know, that move to the 3 seems to be getting a lot more out of not just Levitt, but the other midfielders. And, you know, I think obviously there's a break for the Scottish Cup next weekend, but, you know, I can see Hibs carrying this sort of good form, this momentum, if you like, into that fixture. And, you know, you would hope beyond that as well. You know, I think the difficulty is separating the Scottish Cup game from the rest of the league season, because obviously Hibs will want to be performing well in both. And, you know, after the Cup game next weekend, whatever happens, there's a midweek trip to face Ross County again. So, you know, I think that, you know, you obviously don't want to be having 3 games a week every week, but just having, you know, a sort of target in mind, that next game to focus on. So, you know, it is very much game at a time, but, you know, you can sort of plan ahead and you can say, this is what we need to do. This is what we need to achieve to finish in the top 6. And then you can talk about what happens after that if they have a strong finish to the season. You look at last term, when, you know, I think there was a certain point in the season where I think 3rd, 4th and 5th looked done and dusted. Yeah. And then as we know, it sort of changed dramatically in the last few rounds of the campaign. So, you know, anything's possible. And, you know, really what Hibs have to do is just keep on playing the way they are, grind out results when they have to, get good victories when they can, and, you know, see what happens next.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, a good day for Hibs, and what was a mad day elsewhere in the Scottish Premiership. So mad, in fact, that it prompted a hasty rewrite of our post-match piece, which is always fun. We went from Hibs staying in the hunt for top 6 to actually being in the top 6. So it was a wee bit manic at the end, but it was a welcome turnaround from a Hibs perspective. So yeah, just on that note, we'll leave it there for today. If I could just just draw anybody who's perhaps joining us for the first time, your attention to the ticker at the bottom of the screen there. If you like what we what we do covering Hibs, you can support us by logging onto the Hibs Observer website and subscribing for £4 for 4 months is an offer that we are running at the moment. For all that, you get all this match content, preview and reaction, interviews, features, tactical analysis, which we'll have plenty of heading into next week. But yeah, just want to say thanks for joining us as always. We'll be back again for more reaction at the start of next week. So yeah, enjoy the rest of your weekend and we'll see you again soon.